Good evening. I'm Karen Taylor, Program Director of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, and I'm so pleased that you can all be here this evening, and this of course includes both our in-person audience and our online audience. Now, it seems every lecture I say we have a really special lecture, but we have such a special lecture tonight. Gilded Age Lighting, Transforming the Frick Collection's Historic Fixtures for the 21st Century, with Barbara Livar, Senior Project Manager at Aurora Lampworks, and Jenna Nugent, Head of Curatorial and Exhibition Projects at the Frick Collection. I want to express our appreciation to Barbara and to Jenna for sharing this fascinating restoration with us tonight, and all of their many colleagues who've been involved with the project, and I believe a number of them are here this evening. And I also want to mention in particular Dawn Ladd of Aurora Lampworks. And although the lights might be dim tonight for our lecture this evening, we have been fortunate enough to have been the recipient of Aurora Lampworks' stunning lighting work. These include, this is for the in-person audience because you'll be able to see this, the pendant lights, which are above your head at the moment and are turned off, and the library picture lights, which are on one side of the room. And I hope for our online audience that one day you'll be able to come and see these beautiful lights. We also have another special window display to celebrate tonight's program by Thomas Donahue, who is our artistic window curator. The window was created by Thomas in collaboration with Barbara and Jenna to reflect the spirit of Gilded Age lighting. We encourage you all to look at it before you leave this evening. Tonight is our final event for Archtober, a celebration of architecture and landmarks held every year. You will find more information on the 3 days remaining of the many events that are part of Archtober at archtober.org. For those of you who may be less familiar with the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen, a brief introduction. The General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York was founded in 1785, and that is 240 years ago. We are a non-profit organization, and we were founded by the skilled craftsmen of the City of New York, and we're always so pleased to do anything that celebrates craftsmanship. Today, our organization continues to serve and improve the life for the people of the City of New York through its educational and cultural programs. These include our library, of which the lecture is taking place this evening, the General Society Library, I should say. We have a tuition-free Mechanics Institute, and classes are in session upstairs at the moment. We have the John M. Mossman Locke Museum, worth a look for those of you who are in person after the talk this evening. And finally, our nearly 200-year-old lecture series, of course, of which tonight's talk is part of. I now have the pleasure of introducing our two speakers. Jenna Nugent has worked at the Frick Collection in varying capacities since 2014. From 2021 to 24, she has served as Curatorial Project Manager, overseeing all restoration and renovation initiatives relating to the museum's historic interiors and finishes. In her current role as Head of Curatorial and Exhibition Projects, Jenna is responsible for the management and implementation of all temporary exhibitions, rotating installations of permanent collection objects, and curatorial projects. She holds a BA in Art History and Visual Arts from Barnard College. Barbara Livar is Senior Project Manager at Aurora Lampworks, where she oversees the restoration, replication, and custom fabrication of historic and contemporary lighting fixtures. With a BFA from Syracuse University and a background in the arts, she approaches projects with a maker's perspective and a meticulous attention to detail. Since joining Aurora in 2016, she has managed complex projects for clients such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Johns Hopkins University, and the Frick Collection. I am so pleased to now welcome both Jenna and Barbara here this evening. Thank you.
All right, here we go. Thank you, Karen, for that warm introduction, and thank you, Victoria, and everyone at the General Society for all of your support and enthusiasm. It's an honor to be part of your lecture series. Jenna is going to start off the lecture, but first we'd like to acknowledge that so many people contributed to this project, and as Karen noted, many of them are here in this room with us. So thank you to everyone at Aurora that I work with on a day-to-day basis. Thank you to everyone at the Frick. And thank you to all of the contractors, electricians, designers, lighting and otherwise, and architects that we had the pleasure of working with on this project.
So as Barbara said, we are so pleased to be here to present on a subject that is very near and dear to our hearts. And it's a significant achievement within the broader context of the Frick Collection's first large-scale renovation and enhancement project. This evening, we'll provide a brief history of the Frick family, the origin and construction of their home at 1 East 70th Street, the transformation of that home into a museum for the public in 1935, and then we will shift to the latest project, if you can, much more than a project, undertaken within the last 5 years, which included a wholesale reevaluation of the lighting systems, both art lighting and ambient. We'll delve deep into the indispensable role played by Aurora to restore and modify nearly 200 historic lighting fixtures to help achieve this critical lighting goal, which was set by Selldorf Architects, Beyer, Belle Architects and Planners, as well as the Frick's capital project, conservation, and curatorial teams. So, Henry Clay Frick was born in 1849 in West Overton, Pennsylvania. He made his fortune in the coke and steel industries in and around Pittsburgh, working with the railway titan Andrew Carnegie. In 1882, he married Adelaide Howard Childs, and they had 4 children together, only 2 of whom survived into adulthood, a son Childs and a daughter Helen Clay. Frick moved his family to New York City in 1905, where they leased the Vanderbilt Triple Palace on 5th Avenue between 51st and 52nd Streets, living there for nearly a decade. Frick developed an interest in art as a young man and began collecting in the 1890s. As his fortune grew, so did his collecting habits, acquiring increasingly important paintings, sculpture, furniture, and decorative arts, often at the top of the market. In this posthumous portrait, Frick is shown standing in his great picture gallery at 1 East 70th Street amidst some of his most prized possessions. This slide illustrates just a few of the works collected by Henry Clay Frick in his lifetime. These include paintings by Bellini, Turner, Whistler, Manet, Holbein, sculptures by Antico, a table with gilt bronze by Pierre Gautier, Chinese and European porcelain, enamels, the list goes on. Frick worked with select trusted dealers and would often borrow works, living with them for months at a time before deciding whether or not he wanted to purchase them or send them back. In 1906, he purchased the Lenox Library on 5th Avenue between 70th and 71st Streets with the intent to build a home for his family and his growing art collection. It had been decided that the collections in the private library would be transferred to the newly formed New York Public Library by the time he purchased the land. But Frick could not start demolition or construction until that transfer took place, and the library's holdings were incorporated into the New York Public Library, which didn't take place until 1911 or so. So here we have an excerpt from Beyer, Blinder, Belle's preservation plan that they put together for the Frick in 2018. And in yellow, you see the mansion, and at left is a construction photo of the start of the building of that foundation. So even though he couldn't take occupancy right away after purchasing the plot, he swiftly began plans for his new home. He hired Thomas Hastings of Carrere and Hastings, the same firm that had designed the public library. And Frick told Hastings that he wanted, quote, a comfortable, well-arranged house, simple, in good taste, not ostentatious, end quote, with ample space around it so as not to crowd the sidewalks, and of course with plenty of wall space to display his growing art collection. Construction began in 1912, and here you see the Fifth Avenue facade underway in 1913. Here is Frick's picture gallery under construction, and today it's known as the West Gallery, measuring approximately 98 by 34 feet. The first floor spaces were spacious with high ceilings and significant natural light, and these included reception rooms, including a dining room, living hall, library, etc. The second floor rooms were instead the private living quarters of the family, and composed primarily of bedrooms, sitting rooms, and a breakfast room. On the left, you see Adelaide Frick's bedroom under construction, and on the right, you see the finished room, complete with a decorative painted ceiling and lavish furnishings. Notably, all of the family bedrooms looked out onto Fifth Avenue and Central Park. And here, the finished product can be seen from across the street in Central Park. Hastings delivered on Frick's mandate. The low-lying building sits 75 feet back from Fifth Avenue, providing ample space for a front lawn and garden. And at the time, the ornament was restrained. I know today it's, it's quite ornate, but compared to the Beaux-Arts built homes of Frick's contemporaries, it was considered restrained at the time. So Frick built the home with the intention that it would ultimately become a museum for the public. In his will, dated 1915, he formalized this decision, indicating that an institution to be known as the Frick Collection would be incorporated immediately upon his death for, quote, the purpose of establishing and maintaining a gallery of art in and at the said house, and encouraging and developing the study of the fine arts, and of advancing for general knowledge of kindred subjects, such gallery of art to be for the use and benefit of all persons whomsoever, to the end that the same shall be a public gallery of art to which the entire public shall forever have access. Frick died in 1919 after having lived in the home for only 5 years. His wife survived him by 12 years, after which the trustees of the museum set about to transform the house into a museum. And they engaged John Russell Pope to expand the footprint of the museum so visitors could be welcomed. So here in the massing diagram, you see in orange, or butter yellow, the additions that were part of Pope's project. And these included an entrance hall, a garden court, which you see under construction at left, which enclosed the existing inner courtyard, as well as a construction of the new Frick Art, which at the time was known as the Frick Art Reference Library, which is the building at the northeast corner of the plot. So to create the entrance hall, Pope enclosed the former porte cochere and the inner courtyard. And here's a photo from 1935, and this is the same entrance that visitors access the museum through today. Here are some construction photographs of the garden court and the oval room, and I think our colleagues from Sciame here tonight might find these familiar looking after our recent restoration. And another big part of the early 1930s project was to transform the second floor rooms into offices and seminar rooms. So all bathrooms were removed and some rooms were modified. So here at left, you see the construction of one room, which had been two rooms. It had been Mrs. Frick's bedroom and Ms. Frick, the daughter's bedroom. The next substantial addition was completed in 1977. It included a reception hall to accommodate the growing visitorship to the museum, and two cellar-level seminar rooms, which were quickly repurposed for special exhibitions, and a viewing garden by the famed architect Russell Page. And those are shown in orange on the diagram. And here we are in 2025 with a beautiful finished project. And this was the largest project since 1935 that the Frick has undergone. It added 18,000 square feet of space for improved visitor amenities and accessibility, dedicated spaces for programming, conservation, special exhibitions, and critical infrastructure upgrades. So at left, you see a photograph of the 70th Street facade as it looks today. Our new and improved reception hall, auditorium, special exhibition galleries. This is a view of our current exhibition, To the Holy Sepulchre, which I encourage you all to come and see. And state-of-the-art conservation spaces. So this is our objects conservation lab. Also part of the project was the renovation and restoration of the existing galleries and the transformation of the second floor offices into gallery spaces. And this included really important lighting upgrades. All skylights were replaced, existing track lighting upgraded, new custom picture lights designed and display case lighting, and of course, what we're here to talk about today, integral work done by Aurora on the historic fixtures. And on left, you see a view of the West Gallery, and at right, the breakfast room, which is on the second floor.
Before we get into some restoration case studies, we'd like to go through an overview of the process overall. So basically the logistics, how we worked together and how we were able to restore these fixtures.
As you may also be aware, not only did we embark on this major project in 2020, but we also packed and moved the entire collection during the height of the pandemic to our temporary home in the former Whitney Breuer building, called Frick Madison during our tenure, now owned by Sotheby's. So here's an image of the very beginning of deinstallation in the West Gallery. But before that, starting in 2019, the Frick, the architecture team, project lighting designer, L'Observatoire, began to determine the scope as it related to the historic fixtures. So this required cataloging existing historic fixtures, many of which had been in place since 1914 or 1935. And this was all done in order to identify which might be repurposed in new locations, which would be restored, rewired, reinstalled in their existing locations, which would just stay where they were and not be touched, and which would be deinstalled and stored. So in this slide, if you're not a project manager, you might be panicking on the inside. These are some snippets of some of the documents that we created. So this included massive spreadsheets, color-coded, marked up, reflected ceiling plans, and a master appendix created by BBB and L'Observatoire with input from the Frick and Aurora. One thing to note, at the Frick, historic light fixtures are cataloged as household furnishings in the museum's database, and most of them that were in Aurora's scope were sent to their shop for work.
And that detail that the fixtures were to be sent to our shop was one of the things that we had begun discussing with the Frick in 2019. So as Jenna mentioned, that period was where we got our first look at the lighting fixtures, and we began to have conversations with the curatorial teams, the construction team, and the conservators about how these fixtures could be restored, to what degree they would be restored, and how, in some cases, low-voltage LED spotlights might be integrated into them. But our next step was to remove the fixtures. So here we are in 2020, in the fall of 2020. That's the first time that we went to the Frick. And what you see here is our team working with the Frick's team to take down approximately 24 of the more fragile or unwieldy fixtures. So at left, you have Orest Melnick working with, from our team, he's our lead fabricator, working with Conrad Lewis, the Frick's lead electrician. And at right, we are loading, these are the boucher room sconces, which are being packed on the wall, loaded onto a conservation cart, and moved for packing elsewhere. Many of the more fragile fixtures had to be packed in place before they could be lowered down. So this is a crystal chandelier that was in the director's office on the second floor. And you can't see much of it because all of its individual pendologs have been wrapped in tiny bubble wrappers to protect it as it's lowered down. So the ceilings in those second floor spaces that were residential were relatively low compared to the very large ceiling heights on the first floor. And a lot of these fixtures could be carefully lowered down by hand. So at right, you see Orest, again, working with an electrician from Atlas, lowering down this crystal chandelier before it is put onto a chandelier rack and moved to the staging area. And this is that staging area. So this is the music room at the Frick Collection. And what you see here are all of the chandeliers getting ready to be packed, and then on the right, how they were packed. I want to shout out to Luisa Herrera here. We worked so closely with her throughout this process. The Frick had tagged all of the historic lighting fixtures before we even came on site, but then as they were removed and taken down, everything had to be crossed off a list, checked twice. We had to compare our lists with the Frick's lists and make sure that we were taking everything that we were meant to, and nothing more, of course. So this room was so large, and this was really at the start of construction, that all of those 179 lighting fixtures could easily be staged here, as could the wall furnishings that were being stored, the carpeting, furniture, etc. And once this step was complete, the fixtures were transported back to our shop. So before we go into that, I want to show you what some of these fixtures looked like. So this is a representative sample of some of the fixtures, and you can see that there is a great variety in materials and style. On the left, the wall sconce in the top left, and the crystal chandelier in the center, and then the small flush mount in the bottom left. Those are fixtures from the 1912-1914 period. They were original to the mansion. And the left, those are the boucher room sconces that we were just looking at in the slide before, and then that's the crystal chandelier that was being carefully lowered down. On the right are some fixtures from the Frick Art Research Library. So that's the building that was added in the 1930s, and these fixtures are from the 1930s. I wanted to say anecdotally, the spinning at top right is meant to illuminate library bookcases, much like the ones that are to your left and right here at the General Society. And you would think that rewiring something like that is much simpler than rewiring the crystal chandelier that it is next to. And to some extent, you would be right. But what often happens with these very simple fixtures is that there was such a specific electrical socket inside that fixture, and it is no longer made, and nothing is made that is dimensionally close to it. So it was actually a lot of work to get them rewired for the Frick. So these fixtures are some of the sorts where we did a very basic scope of work, and it was to clean them, rewire them, and UL list them, so bringing them up to the current safety standards of today. In this next slide, you see some other fixtures that were taken down and on which we worked. We were asked to provide a greater scope of work for about 18 fixtures throughout the existing and renovated gallery spaces. This included refinishing fixtures in cases where existing finishes had failed, and that's the case with the pendant on the left. It is either Miss or Mrs. Frick's bathroom pendant. I can't remember which. And then in the center, you see a garden court lantern. And all of these photos, I should already have said, these are all pre-restoration photos. So this is what the fixtures looked like when we received them from the Frick. But that fixture was one of the ones that was to receive the integrated LED spotlighting. And then on the right, you have a fixture that needed both of those treatments. So the pendant on the left required additional finishing, pendant in the center, spotlighting, and then the chandelier on the right had to be fully polished and also received integrated LED spotlighting. So once those fixtures come to our shop, we have to assess and document them. And we treat them like newborns. So we measure them, we photo document them, we weigh them, sometimes on our postal scale, sometimes on our hanging scale. And what we're doing as we go through this process is figuring out what it is that we're working with and how we're going to execute the scope of work that we have to do, which is the restoration and the lighting integration. So we're also getting our first close look at how the fixtures are made, and we need to understand what we're going to do in order to make them code compliant. So the fixture at left is one of the library fixtures, and that's Manuel, our lead technician, opening up the body. And this is something that, of course, we could never see from the ground. We've done a number of gilt wood fixtures, and that's what this is, so we had our suspicions about what we would find. But all of these electrical wires are running into the center of this wood body, and that's where they're electrically spliced together, which is not acceptable for current codes, you know. That doesn't work for us. So that is a case where we would add a metal, a metal container to enclose those splices. And at right, you see Orist, again, our fabricator, and he's working on the walnut rim chandelier, and he is reworking its inner structure. When we first got this fixture into our shop and we began to take it apart from the bottom up, which is the way we often disassemble chandeliers, we found that there actually was no internal structure on the main rod. Usually there is, but in this case, as soon as we removed that bottom piece, all of the other pieces wanted to, to go. And so that is the kind of thing that we also have to address when we do this restoration work. We need to make things more easily maintainable and safer. So all of this measuring, all of this weighing, all of this photography gets communicated to the client, in this case the Frick, as a condition report. And this is a document that gives us those fixture details, the general condition notes, and we also start to wrap our heads around how we are proposing to do rewiring, how we are proposing to treat the finish, et cetera. So this is a living document, and as we continue on through the project, we revise these pages and then we add to them. So when we start to figure out wiring diagrams, that page gets added, and as we go through our mock-up process, pages get added. And speaking of mock-ups, cleaning tests and mock-ups were a very large part of this process. As I hope you could take away from some of those representative images and what we've talked about so far, there were a variety of materials that were used to make up the fixtures of the Frick collection. There were the gilt wood chandeliers, gilt bronze chandeliers, silver chandeliers, aluminum spun ceiling fixtures. It was a great variety. And for all of those different types, we had to work with the Frick and receive guidance from the Frick about how they should be cleaned. And so here we have, again, the gilt wood library chandelier. And what you see at left is Joe Godla's hand with a Q-tip. Joe Godla is the former chief conservator at the Frick. And here he's doing a cleaning sample. So what would often happen during this process is that the Frick would come out to our shop, we would take a look at something together, they would give us a suggestion about the best means and methods, the best way to treat the finishes of these fixtures, and then we would try to follow their guidance. And so at right, what you have is a finished sample prepared by Kate at our shop, where she has cleaned this section of this giltwood chandelier. And something like that would be presented back to the Frick, communicated about, and we would sort of refine this finishing process. So it was very exciting for all of us to be working with the Frick's conservators to restore these fixtures. It's a great process. Other types of sampling. So the Frick provided new shades for all of the fixtures, and that is something that we had to understand. And we also had to replace all of the primary wiring on the fixtures. I'm going to see if I can figure out the pointer versus the flashlight. Got it? Okay, so apologies to the online audience. You won't be able to see what I'm pointing to, but so here's this beautiful shade mock-up that the Frick brought to our shop. This is, again, one of the Boucherum sconces. Some of its crystals are not here in this photo. But this is the original candle cover that was on the fixture. But this socketry wasn't usable. When we do rewire a fixture, we have to provide all new UL certified components. And on the right, you see that we're doing a sample of what that end result is going to look like. So a new candle cover, a new socket inside, which you can't see, and the shade. And then here at right, a number of the fixtures at the Frick also had fabric trim and material. They had fabric-covered rods and beautiful tassels that were
falling apart.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, they were. Thank you.
Disintegrating.
They were disintegrating. And so they had to be replaced as part of the restoration. We see that often with fixtures that come through the shop, that those components don't last, but the bodies of the chandeliers do. And so here is a sample, a piece of that library fixture being compared to some material samples for tassels and trim. So as we've mentioned, I think, integrating new LED spotlighting was a big part of the work that we did on some of the fixtures. And for me, this slide is to say that there are some successful mock-ups and then there are some unsuccessful mock-ups, but they're always valuable. So the mock-up that you see at left is one of the library chandeliers, and what you see, what you see here, in-person audience. So this is the body of the chandelier, and this is a ring that our fabricator, Orist, has made to hold these little LED spotlights that get mounted to the fixture. We tried a lot of different ways, as you'll see in these photos on right, conceptually, of integrating this kind of spotlighting into the fixtures, and that was part of the process. So this was a deeply collaborative process, and here you can see some of the team that we got to work with at the Frick. So at far left, you told me not to name them all, but I'm going to.
Go for it.
There's Julia Day from the Frick's conservation team. She's now the chief conservator. Yenny from LOI, the lighting designer, in the back. Luisa Herrera from the Frick in the back. Oliver from the Selldorf team, and Carolyn also from the Frick there. In the center is what I think of as a glamour shot of the Frick team. They are not, I'm sure they were thinking deep thoughts, but I can't remember what they were, just that we were reviewing things. But all to say, it was a wonderful communication that we had with everybody, and it worked well. So at right here, this is Victoria Schussler, one of the conservators at the Frick, doing some painting samples. And so again, that process went back and forth in terms of how are we treating the finish, what are we doing to these fixtures. So while we're doing all of this deep thinking at Aurora about fixtures, which is great, we also have to be thinking about what's happening back at the site. I've mentioned UL listing a couple of times, but I don't think I've actually told you what that is. I'm sure some of you know, but UL stands for Underwriters Laboratories. It is technically an organization, a nationally recognized testing organization, but it is also, they provide a standard, a safety standard to which we test electrical lighting. And UL applies a safety standard I think from everything to like chairs all the way to very complicated systems, but lighting is one of those things. And we have to understand what's happening on a job site because we have to understand how fixtures are going to be reinstalled there, and whether the conditions that are in this case, a historic home, are up to current standards. So what we found at the Frick was that at left you have one of the Beyer, Belle team taking a closer look up at a ceiling, but he of course isn't able to see anything. And so at right you see that this is another room, this is the breakfast room, where these chandeliers were being reinstalled. In order to ensure that they could be reinstalled safely, parts of the ceiling had to be removed so that we could all understand what the conditions were that were there. And because some of these chandeliers were very heavy, we wanted to understand whether those original conditions could support the load of the fixtures. And for the UL safety standard, it's actually 4 times the load of the fixtures. So what you see here at right, that's Catherine from the Sciame team, and she is photographing a load testing event. And so we were very lucky that at this time, as you can see, the Frick was under construction. And so Sciame's team was able to utilize parts of the demolished facade and building and use them to apply loads to these chandelier mounting points. So this is, these are many, many, many diagrams, and not even all of the diagrams showing all of the different ways we had to re-enter the Frick through the course of construction. We made multiple deliveries back to the Frick. Louisa is laughing because she is the one who prepared these diagrams for us and told us how we could get these fixtures safely back into the Frick around all of the different construction activities that were happening. And at left, what you see is that our last delivery, I think it was the last one, was made, unfortunately, after the temporary loading dock had been removed. And so the Frick's art handlers, lucky folks, got to hand carry a chandelier that I think is over 100 pounds up the stairs of the entrance hall and back into the building.
So, as Barbara mentioned, Aurora was present and participated in the deinstallation of many of the chandeliers and also the reinstallation, but the Frick's team also reinstalled chandeliers without Aurora present. This is a video of our team reinstalling the grand stair chandelier. I was taking the video and holding my breath the entire time. It's a gilt wood chandelier. It had been rewired by Aurora, but restored by our in-house team. It's very light, but it's very, very delicate. So you see, we have a lot of people working to make sure it stays straight, it's not swinging, and our head art preparator is there at the top, Pat King, to get it safely up, and then our electrician goes up on that same lift and makes the wiring connections into the ceiling. So now we're going to jump into a few case studies. So obviously we can't tell you about the process for all 179 fixtures. We would be here for days. So we've made a selection of a few that warranted different levels of intervention. So these include the entrance hall, which is where we'll start. So here you see a snippet of Pope's floor plan showing the new entrance hall. At the time it was called the reception hall. When we later added a reception hall, it became the entrance hall. So this is where everyone comes into the museum. It's where they've always come into the museum. And from here so here, they can enter the home as the family would have entered it, or they can go north into the garden court, which will be our second case study. So before we talk about the entrance hall itself, we need to look at Mr. Frick's office. So from archival photographs, including the one you see here, we know that the chandelier was in this space. This space was demolished as part of the 1930s expansion to add the oval room and east gallery adjacent to the west gallery. And so the chandelier came down, and much like we did with this project, the team at the time thought, oh, well, let's reuse it somewhere else. And so it was assigned to the entrance hall. So it's an 8-arm gilt bronze chandelier with garlands, lion's heads, and oval medallions. And at right, you see an inventory card, which is in our expansive archives. And it shows that the chandelier was cleaned and rewired by E.F. Caldwell and Company in November of 1935. And Caldwell was a premier designer and manufacturer of electric light fixtures during this time. The cost for this service at the time was $122, which is about $2,800 today. So here at left, you see the entrance hall under construction, almost finished, but not quite. Missing the chandelier, of course. Unfortunately, we don't have a photograph from the 30s of the finished space. At right, you see a few excerpts from memoranda that were sent from the Caldwell team to the then director of the Frick, Frederick Mortimer Clapp, advising as to when would be best to reinstall the chandelier. So at top, he says, wait as long as possible because it will accumulate dust and the dust is hard to remove. So
It is. It's hard to remove.
We experienced that firsthand. And then at bottom, he's advising that it'll probably take an entire day, 2 people to rehang the chandelier, and cost and whatnot. And at the time, they didn't have hydraulic lifts, so Aurora's team deinstalled and reinstalled the chandelier with the help of Sciame and electricians using a lift, and some modern technology to make it a bit safer. This photo is from the 1970s, so you see the finished entrance hall, you see it with the chandelier, the turnstile, a ticketing office, there's also a coat check. The space includes, to this day, limestone walls matching the exterior facade and a gilt wood ceiling with carved and cast plaster elements. And at center is a really quite wonderful medallion, and from there is where the chandelier hangs. This is a photograph from 2020 of the same space. Of course, this was taken while we were moving out, so disregard all the trash in the lower left corner. But as you can see here, it's a bit misleading, looking through here, the doors in the reception hall are closed they're only closed when the museum is closed. So this would have a lot of natural light coming in. But we've always had an issue in this space with light levels. It was always dark. So here at some point, 8 standing modern light fixtures were added to try to help this issue. Of course, they're not contemporary with the rest of the finishes in the house, so we wanted to do away with them. They also make the space feel a little cluttered. And I also want to make a note here about it's really hard to photograph lighting. So here the lights look really warm in temperature. They were warm, but not to quite the extent they look on the screen. And here's today, where it looks far cooler. It's not quite that cool. So, but it's much improved, not cluttered. The uplights on the ceiling highlight the amazing, the wood and the gilding, and also just make the space feel lighter and more airy. And there were a few other integrations to add light onto the floor as well, but those were separate from the work on the chandelier.
Yeah. And so those uplights that Jenna was talking about are integrated onto the chandelier itself. And I'm going to try to look and point and also be heard. This is a closer look at that chandelier, again, there with the lions. And at right is the wiring diagram showing us 2 different circuits that make up that chandelier. So there are, of course, the 8 arms, which you see here at left. They have the shades, of course, and then those are represented here with the rectangles in orange. So that's one line voltage circuit running up along the chandelier into the junction box above the canopy at the top. And then at left in the image, above the lion and just below the chain, you see where the spotlights were integrated onto the chandelier by our team. And that on the right in the diagram is represented here in red. Again, that circuit runs up into the junction box. But in this case, the wiring continues. And the reason it continues is that the LED spotlights that are integrated are low voltage, so they can't be connected, as you would plug something in to the wall. They need a piece in between them. They need an electrical driver that will lower the voltage that comes out of the wall to something that they can handle. In this case, 12 volts. So, wrong button. So we're going to take a closer look at this ring. So the LED spotlights themselves are made by a company called Eclipse. Thank you. The light is called the Pixie light. And at right, you see a technical diagram from the specification sheet for that light. What you see at the top, well, let's start at the bottom. What you see at the bottom here is that this is the Pixie light itself. The LED is housed inside this metal structure. It has a little neck, and then Eclipse also provides this Pixie with a dedicated socket. So all of this is one system prepared by Eclipse Lighting. And our job was to integrate this into the chandelier in a way that would provide the ceiling illumination that the Frick wanted in this space, but to do it in a way that was reversible and could be easily maintained over time. And that is sort of how we consider all of the work that we do, especially with historic fixtures. It needs to be reversible. So what you see at left is that same Pixie spotlight with its little neck. And right below it here, this is a brass socket cup that was prepared by our fabricator, Orist. And it is made custom to accept this Pixie light. And on this chandelier, there are 8 of these LEDs mounted onto this ring. And these individual 8 cups are mounted here. So this brass ring just rests gently on top of this chandelier. And it's able to do that because it's custom fit. We had the chandelier in-house. We were able to measure that part of the fixture. And then our fabricator, Orist, was able to make that component be exactly the correct size to fit that fixture. So this ring is, if you imagine, this ring sits on the body of the chandelier, and then there is a chain that travels up toward the ceiling through it. So it would be very difficult to remove it or to access it or to service it unless there was some way for you to take it apart. So this ring is made in 2 parts. And we're going to advance. Over the last couple of weeks, Sarah, who's also here in the audience, has been working with Orist. Orist has been reliving his past. He fabricated another custom ring. It's here. You all can take a look at it. We also have some Pixie lights so you can better understand how they come apart and how they light. But Sarah and Orist have prepared some videos showing what goes into fabricating a ring like this. And so we'll start. So there it is. The ring, as you can see here, that's the hinging mechanism. It starts its life as a brass C channel that is rolled. That's Orist rolling it. He measures it. Once it's rolled, he cuts it in 2, and here he is fabricating the custom hinge on a custom jig that he has prepared to do just that. And so you can see there's the pin going into that tubing. There is much cleaning of the ring. There's a lot of finishing work that goes into it, and you can see how detailed this process is. And now this is like quadruple time, but we wanted to show you, you can make the ring, and then you also have to make all of the mounting points for those LED spotlights to mount to them, to mechanically attach to them. And so here he is marking and punching and drilling And shortly he will be tapping those holes, cleaning again. And then here you see the cup, which we didn't show a fabrication video for, but there is the pixie. So hopefully that gives you some idea. You know, that was much accelerated. That was very, very fast. And of course, we showed you some of those mock-ups that we tried first. This was not where we started. You know, there was a long process of figuring out where the lights would be, how they would be attached, et cetera. But this is where we ended up. And I should also say, I think it's important to say that when we started this project, all of this kind of thinking had been determined, you know, like BBB and the Frick conservators and the construction team had the idea that these lights would be installed onto the fixture in some way. And so our scope was to make it happen. I want to talk a little bit about the cleaning of the fixture. Jenna mentioned the construction dust, and when we received the fixture, it was in fact very dusty and there was a lot of built up wax on it. And so what you see at left is how the fixture came to us in those conditions, and what you see at right is a close-up of the cleaned fixture. And the finish in this case was sound, so all it really needed was a deep cleaning to remove the decades of dust and dirt. We talked a little bit about load testing before, and that was something that we had to do for this chandelier. It weighed in excess of 100 pounds. And so what you see here is that entrance hall under construction, and the ceiling medallion had to be removed because we weren't able to see what was going on up in the ceiling, what kinds of wire were being run to that point, et cetera. So at left, in red, that's Leonard Holker, formerly of UL, our dear former UL inspector, and Manuel, our technician, is with him in the lift. They're preparing this location so that we can do a load test, and you see that at right. So they have installed a cable from the ceiling. It runs down. Right about here, there's a certified scale that we use to verify how much load we're applying to the bottom. And again, here you have a piece of the Frick building being used to apply that load.
So moving right along to the garden court. This is a beautiful space. It measures about 90 feet long by 50 feet wide and tops out about 32 feet high. It's just north of the entrance hall and connects the entrance hall with the new galleries that were added. So this is, again, all part of the 1930s project. So the mansion's exterior eastern facade became the western wall of the garden court. So the inner courtyard was enclosed. So that, in this photo you see on the right-hand side. And Pope made the decision to design the room around that existing facade, replicating limestone arches, carvings, and other decorative elements around the entire perimeter. It's the space, as you can see, we have 40 limestone columns, a fountain, plant beds for living plants, sometimes to the dismay of our art conservators, and a massive domed glass paneled ceiling and skylight. So given its size, the garden court called for 10 new light fixtures for the arcade. So there was an extant lantern design in Caldwell's catalog, and that was initially proposed for the garden court arcade. But after some back and forth with the owner's representatives and Caldwell, it was decided that some adjustments should be made to the design. So the new design, shown in the blueprint at right, was fabricated by Caldwell and later incorporated into their catalog. And at the lower left, you see a photograph captured by Barbara's team when they were dismantling the fixture, yes. Which includes the Caldwell stamp. And do you want to talk to the
Oh,
other
well,
piece.
there it is, yes. And it's cropped almost out of frame because we also found this local union electrical inspection sticker, which I thought was great. And we left that inside the canopies of the fixtures when they were reinstalled. So that's why such close cropping. But that is the Caldwell mark, the diamond with the C inside it. It's always very exciting to see that at the shop.
So this photograph from 1927 shows the driveway at 1 East 70th Street, which led to the porte cochere and that inner courtyard, which was then enclosed as the garden court. So pure speculation, but the selection of a lantern for this arcade was maybe inspired by the mansion's exterior lighting. You see a lantern here, and perhaps another way to bring the outside inside. And meld together Pope's design with Thomas Hastings. We have our inventory card for these fixtures, and each lantern was $125, so about $3,000 each in today's money. The garden court niches have always served to display important sculptures along the north and south elevations and also on pedestals within the plant beds. And before the renovation project, there was no dedicated art lighting for the works in the niches. And so at times they were in shadow and often overlooked by visitors. In terms of the general restoration scope in the garden court, it was a big one. The wholesale replacement of the skylights, the cleaning and reinstallation of the original 1930s ley light glass, the cleaning of much of the limestone surfaces, the fountain was restored and replumbed, new drainage systems added to the plant beds, and a whole slew of other things that made the space functional and also feel brighter and more vibrant. So here's an example of an art plan that we prepared for the lighting designers. So it was clear where the lanterns were located and where the sculptures that needed to be lit were located. So in this case, it's rather simple. The lanterns are directly in front of the niches. And so there are 5 niches, so 5 of the lanterns were included in Aurora's scope. So this is the finished result. There's a incorporated pixie light on the chain, which very nicely lights the bust. In this case, you see a bust of Antonio Galli by Jongelink.
And here's electrically what's going on with this fixture. So as Jenna mentioned, there is a pixie mounted about halfway up the chain, and that was something that LOI had determined would be ideal in terms of location to mount these busts. The angle was right, the distance was correct, they could get the amount of light that they wanted. And so in addition to restoring the fixture itself, our scope of work was to figure out how we would get that pixie mounted discreetly onto the chain. And then there is, of course, the fixture itself. And, it's the lantern body here. And there are 6 lights that are housed inside it. But before we get into that, we're going to take a closer look at the pixie. So this is the solution that our team came up with in terms of how to attach the pixie discreetly to the chain. Again, you see here, there's the pixie light by Eclipse Lighting. Its socketry is disguised by this beautiful brass cup that our fabricator prepared. And onto this chain, in order to get this onto the chain, he has prepared this component to the left. And this is a custom clip. So these 2 pieces, the custom mounting clip and the custom socket cup, are one in this case. They're soldered together. But what I think is really, really cool about what Orist did is that chain is uniform. You can buy chain that has the same shape, but different fixtures have different profiles in terms of their chain, and Orist was able to shape these clips to perfectly take the contour of the chain in this case. So we're going to watch another little video. We're not going to see this cup made. We're just going to see a video that shows us a little bit of what the process is like making the clip component. So here Orist has a piece of solid brass rod on the milling machine, and he is milling out this groove, and that is the groove that is going to attach to the chain. And what you see here, but you can't really see, is that Orist by eye raises and lowers that milling bit to create that contour so that that clip can perfectly seat over the chain. There is no CAD, there is no anything, it's just how he does it, and it works out every time. So we always start with a round rod, cut it into pieces. Here you see the two pieces seat, the two pieces getting soldered together. And we skipped a few steps, there's the finished product. And the pixie with its socket being threaded in to the cup. And there it is back on the chain. So, inside. On the left, these are the sockets that were originally inside the lantern, and we treat the fixtures holistically, so our scope was also to rewire the fixtures and clean them, of course. And I think these were probably rewired in the 70s sometime. I wasn't able to figure out when these sockets started or stopped being made. But what you can see here is that, you know, they're looking a little worse for wear, and there is a clip holding this socket cup closed. And on the right, you see essentially the same setup. So we've kept what was there in spirit, but we've improved some of the internal mechanisms here to make things safer. And we've applied our safety stickers, it's very important. Because there were so many sockets inside this lantern, we had to do heat testing. So UL has many categories for what is considered standard and what is considered outside of standard. And whenever anything shifts to outside of standard, we just have to test. And so the testing, the context of the testing would be like the maximum heat capacity for the socket or some other internal electrical component. And so this, again, is Lenny, Leonard Holker, formerly of UL, doing some heat testing at the shop. One other thing I wanted to mention, so at left, this is the top of the garden court lantern. This is the loop where the chain connects to it and it goes up. And what you can see is that there are two wires here exiting the lantern body. And at right, you see the finished photo here. And what you see is one wire exiting this lantern. When we received the fixtures, it wasn't always common to have to ground a lighting fixture itself. You might be grounding the electrical junction box or something like that, but you didn't have to ground the fixtures. So all of the fixtures left our shop grounded. And even though we've actually added a third wire in here, our team covers those lead wires with a custom painted fiberglass sheathing so that everything looks very elegant when it's exiting the body of the fixture and making its way up to the canopy. Here at left is a close-up of the finish. So this was a gilt finish at the top of the crown and then an applied finish here. There was an applied lacquer finish. There wasn't like a deep review of that with conservation, but it seemed relatively sound. So again, this was a fixture where a deep cleaning was all that was needed in order to make it look richer and bring it back to life, as you can see on the right.
And that's the garden court today. So our third and final case study is looking at the Walnut Room, which was originally in the location of Mr. Frick's bedroom. In the 1930s, the walls between a bathroom and closets and his bedroom were demolished, and so the room was made larger and has been known as the Walnut Room for as long as I know. So this photograph from 1927 shows the bedroom as it was in Frick's time. The silver gilt chandelier shown here was removed sometime between 1927, when this photo was taken, and 1935. And at that time it was replaced with an 8-armed silver gilt chandelier. To the best of our knowledge, the fixture pictured here was moved into storage around 1935 and stayed there. We know from this inventory card and other archival documentation that the chandelier was elsewhere in the house pre-1935 and was then repurposed for the Walnut Room. We are still trying to solve the mystery of where it was before. And so here on the right, you see an invoice for the cost of rewiring that chandelier in the 30s. So here we have the room in 2020. It was our conference room, our primary conference room space, and fortunately we had to add that ugly television screen at the end. So the intent, as was the case in all the second floor spaces, was to turn the spaces into galleries. So the curatorial team did a lot of thinking about what each room would look like, what would be displayed in each room, and how to make the second floor feel continuous with the first. So in this room, we restored the beautiful walnut finishes, the nickel-plated window hardware and door hardware, marble fireplace, which you don't see in this image, and we also replaced the carpeting and installed custom electrified picture rails, which were designed by Art Preservation Services and Steve Weintraub, who's here today. And while inventorying the chandeliers, the conservation team flagged this one as likely needing more than just a deep clean. So again, here's the art plan for the space. So the layouts showed or identified where three-dimensional objects would be that would require lighting. All of our paintings are lit with picture lights. So here we're really just looking at the sculptures, which are denoted in green, and a piece of furniture in red orange. And the yellow circle at center shows uplighting. So there was, in this case, we wanted to have spotlights for the objects and also to illuminate the ceiling. And we did just that. So here we have two busts by Udon that are beautifully lit. The flowers at center are part of a temporary exhibition.
And while we're on this slide, what I want to point out to you, and you'll see it in the next slide, but here the art is in place, so I think it's helpful. So you obviously have the chandelier here, and as Jenna mentioned, the goal was to create ambient light, more ambient light with the integrated LEDs, but also to create the spotlighting for the art. So there are, up here at the canopy, there are the LED spotlights, and these are the ones that are aiming down to light these sculptures. And then you can't see it well here, but you will see it well soon. This is the area where the LED spotlights were integrated into the body, and they are shining up to create that ambient lighting. So here you see it again. Again, this chandelier ended up having 3 circuits because it had 2 separate, the pixies at the ceiling could be controlled separately from the pixies in the body. And then, of course, we have the chandelier arms themselves. So we have 1 line voltage circuit and 2 low voltage circuits. This is a close-up of the pixies in the ceiling. We don't have a video for this one. I think I had exhausted the team with my penchant for videos. But you can see that there is a very thin ring that is sandwiched between the existing historic canopy of the fixture and the ceiling of this room. And the pixies with their cups are mounted to that ring. Again, this is a 2-part ring, so that if you ever have to get in there, you can take the 2 parts of the ring apart and get easier access. And then we're going to do a close-up of what we did here in the body. You might remember earlier in the lecture I showed you a picture of Orist standing and redoing the internal structure of this chandelier. It was this one, the walnut room. We tried different ways of integrating LED spotlighting on other parts, lower parts of this fixture, but none of them were that successful. And so what we ended up doing was extending the height of the chandelier just a tiny bit. And so what you see here is a beautiful cast component just above the LED spotlights. That's original. Here, where the LED spotlights are attached to the body, that is a new component that has been added into the body. And then this, again, below it is an original spun, actually I think it's cast, body component below. And the nice thing about the pixie lights is that they're very flexible. So if you don't want to use the ambient lighting in the room, you can remove this spotlight and keep all of this internal structure, and it's relatively minimal. If you're really looking for it, I think you can find it. But if you want to light one art object because you've redone the room instead of 3, you can do that, and you just remove the light. You don't have to disassemble the chandelier in order to remove the lighting from it. And so, as Jenna mentioned, the Frick, we're going to talk about finishes now. The Frick team had flagged this fixture as one that might need a deeper level of restorative treatment to its finish. At left, you see the chandelier overall as we received it, and that's our condition report photo. At a distance, it doesn't look that bad. But when you get up close to it, you can see how much tarnish had developed along the body of the fixture. So this fixture had a silver finish, and that silver finish had been sealed in with a coat of lacquer. And as that lacquer failed over time, the tarnish had started to develop in a rather unattractive way across the body of the fixture. During a very early meeting with the Frick, Julia Day, now the conservator at the Frick, came out and did an experiment where what you see at left and at right are the same candle cup. So this plate and this plate are the same. And what you see here in red is that plate before a cleaning treatment was done, and at right after the cleaning treatment was done. And the cleaning treatment that Julia tried was using a rubber eraser and a little bit of saliva to see if the tarnish could be taken up out of the lacquer surface, and it was very successful. It was a very interesting way to remove tarnish, though not ultimately the way that we went. But for us at Aurora, extremely cool. It was so cool. So what did we end up doing? It was determined in consultation with the conservators and with the rest of the team at the Frick that the best course of action would be to remove the lacquer finish that had failed and to refinish the fixture. So you see 2 candle cups in this image, and the one at left has had its lacquer removed, and the one at right is original. And you can see that the one on the left is brighter overall, but you can also start to see these are cast components, and there is a desirable level of tarnish that we would want to maintain with a fixture of this age. We don't want to strip it of all its life. But you can start to see that the tarnish in those deep areas is a little irregular. Brief mention, this is a UV lamp that the Frick conservators brought to our shop, and it was used during this process to ensure that we were fully removing all of the lacquer from the fixture. We're into this refinishing process, so all of the original lacquer finish has to be removed before we can move through refinishing, and then ultimately the goal would be to re-lacquer the fixture, so we don't want to leave anything behind and seal it back in. The lacquer fluoresced under UV light. You can kind of see that. This is an image of the lamp, which I thought was important, but you can really see it here on the right. So this plate at left in the right-hand image has had its lacquer removed. You can still see there are some spots, some little nooks and crannies where we needed to go further, but the one at right is the one that has the lacquer still in place, and you can see that that's very easy to see under the UV light, so it's a very good way of checking to see if we're doing our work thoroughly. So ultimately, here you see a very bright candle cup at left and a very bright body piece at right. And so that tarnish did not remain. Once we removed the lacquer from the fixture, the tarnish that was left behind was not attractive anymore. So it was collectively determined that we would go ahead with polishing the fixture, and this involved a lot of test cleaning to make sure that we were going far enough but not going too far. We wanted to leave as much of that original finish and fixture in place. because nobody wanted to wait 100 years for the tarnish to come back up, it was determined that we would apply finish back to the fixture. So what you see all the way to the left, the sample marked A, is just a sample of a cleaned and polished candle cup with, in this case, a clear coat of lacquer, because the team wanted to see that, to see if that was the finish that they wanted for the room. And then in the middle, we saw earlier Victoria Schussler from the Frick had come to do some samples at the shop, and this is what she was working on. She was testing out different ways of applying tint to these fixture components so that we could get the depth back. So in the center, this was a brown tint that was applied, and all the way at right, this is a black tint that was applied. And what we ended up doing was mixing that tint into the lacquer itself, applying it so that it would get into the recesses, rubbing it back, and then sealing the whole thing over with a clear coat. These are some images of the finished piece. And this is the end. Oh, well, it's not quite the end.
We have, before we start the Q&A, one little light show.
Oh, yes, there's a little light show. Before we start the light show, a really big thank you from Aurora to the Frick. We were able recently to take our entire staff to the Frick for a private tour, which was amazing. You know, it was like all the things that one doesn't get to think about when they're in the midst of a construction project, and then you leave the job site and you never really see the finished result, unless there's a problem and then you come back. But in this case, we were all able to go back and see the fixtures installed, see the artwork, see the renovated space, and it was wonderful. So thank you, Jenna and the Frick.
And at right is a few members of our team, and a lot that are not pictured, but yes, thank you. And it was a pleasure working with the Aurora team.
Yeah, and still not the end. We want to give a special thank you to Thomas Donahue, who, as Karen mentioned, did the window display outside. But he also helped us set up a display inside. Thomas has a collection of beautiful busts, and do you want to advance the slide?
So this is an image of our octagon room gallery, and this is one of the fixtures that Aurora rewired and integrated pixie lights into, and so the bust is lit from that. These pixie lights are really hidden, and so the bust is lit from that, and Thomas had a very similar bust, albeit in plaster, not marble. And Aurora whipped up a lantern with a pixie light.
Lantern. So to the right of me, but to your left. Okay. So here is the lantern that we brought, and on the piano, I'm not sure that all of you will be able to see, but the second bust that Thomas was kind enough to loan us is on the piano. I'm just going to flip the switch, and you'll see the lantern come on, and you'll see the pixie light illuminate the bust. And later, after everything is over, you can come up and take a closer look. We have some samples of the fabricated components here that you can take a look at, and as I think I said before, some of the pixie lights. So if you're interested in that, you can take a look. And I'm going to flip the switch.
Thank you both so much. That was absolutely fantastic. So comprehensive, so detailed, and you were just a terrific team. You just worked so well together. Really, we are so grateful for you for sharing this wonderful project. Before we take questions, I wondered if we could ask everyone who's either connected with the Frick, Aurora Lampworks, has had anything to do with the project. Could you stand up so we could acknowledge your wonderful work?
Oh, yes, let's.
Thank you. And is the wonderful Oris here?
No.
Okay.
No, but his family is here.
Okay, well,
Yes.
that's anyway. So I would now like to open the floor both to online questions and to in-person questions. Do we have anyone in the in-person? Okay, here we go.
On the subject of color temperature, did you try to go back to the original design of the warmth of the light, or was that all dictated by the conservators?
Very good question. So, of course, so when the house was built, it had electric lighting, so it had in the sort of warmth of incandescent bulbs. As part of the project, everything became LED. So there was a lot of discussions around color temperature because we have a lot of different light sources. We have a lot of daylight, we have picture lights, but the decision was made for the historic fixtures that we wanted to retain some of that warmth to keep the domestic feel of the space. We didn't want it to feel cold, and so it was a bit of a balancing act in terms of balancing the warmth of those bulbs that were chosen with the art lighting, which is basically 3,000 Kelvin.
And that is, I didn't put an image of it in because I was told it was not helpful, but we did do, we had the teams over, and while the fixtures were being restored, the light bulbs came to Aurora, and there was,
Yes, that was part of the mock-ups.
yeah.
Right. Another question?
Hi, thank you. This is all really fascinating. I wonder if you could just say a few words about the skylights and the restoration of those.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, the skylights were wholesale replaced, and that was a whole nother team of specialists. We had the lighting designer, we had, again, Steve Weintraub from Art Preservation Services, L+U, who are do daylight studies. So we did a lot of mock-ups to select and determine what the glass would be. Of course, no UV light comes through the glass. And then, of course, there's also the lay lights, and then there's a whole shade system in between the lay lights and the skylights, which is all automatic. So you push a switch and they open to varying degrees. And there's also, in that sandwich, there's also LED lighting, so that when it gets dark at 3 p.m. in the winter, we can still have the feel of some light in those spaces.
Very well done presentation. I have a question about the light fixtures being sourced by Frick. Was it a mixture of American-made fixtures and European? Was there any issues with matching new components with threadings versus what was done probably ad hoc in the past? And how did you address that, if that was something, European sourced versus American sourced materials?
So I'm looking at Joe. I think it's mostly American, was mostly American sourced, but it's in the European style. But that doesn't mean that they didn't use some European components. Mm-hmm. The difficulty we have with the archives is that everything that was acquired by Frick was not acquired directly by Frick from the supplier. So it went through the architect or the interior designer, and sometimes those invoices just say 8-arm chandelier, and so it's a lot of cross-checking and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So, but majority American-made.
Yeah, and then I think what we found with the fixtures that we restored, we didn't talk very much about the actual arms of the chandelier and the socketry that is there, but it is very important, and there is a lot of work that our team does to make sure that new sockets can be mounted well and safely onto the historic arms of the fixtures. I spoke with Manuel last week, and I think we were trying to recall, we did find some metric threading. There's like an internal component that's hidden by the candle cover, And some of those did have metric threading. A lot of them had American threading. One of them might have had what we thought was an extinct American thread. Typically, those are pieces that we just couldn't match it. We couldn't figure out what it was. So typically, that internal component, which is not visible, is removed and replaced with its modern equivalent, because sometimes when you try to rethread that part, you end up with an unstable connection, which we can't have.
Right, this is an online question. It's very open-ended, Barbara.
Great.
Get ready.
How did you learn to do this?
Oh, Dawn taught me. No, so I started working at Aurora in 2016, and the team there is so incredibly generous. Dawn is my mentor, and Orest, of whom much was said, and Manuel, similarly. They have so much knowledge between them. Manuel has been with the company for 30 years, and electrically he knows how to do anything. And I hope you could appreciate the degree to which Orest is just a master fabricator. Dawn is there guiding us all and making sure we're all rolling in the same direction. But we have such wonderful and talented specialists, and so they're very generous with their knowledge. And I learned
What a
on the
good
job.
answer.
Yeah.
And Jenna, now, but the lighting, of course, was only one facet of this amazing restoration. So were you juggling so many different parts of the restoration? How did that work?
I was, so I'm sort of an honorary member of the project team, but not officially. So we had a project team. A few of the members are here tonight, and they were overseeing the entire project. And then I came in as the curatorial project manager in fall of 2021, because our chief curator determined at that time that he needed someone in the curatorial department who could have eyes on this, because the curators were managing another museum and doing exhibitions there as well. So I became that person and worked very closely with the project team, with Joe Godla, who was also a member of that team. And we were juggling everything all the time. And I'm sure many of you can appreciate, with construction sites, you just can't expect what's going to happen, especially when you're dealing with a building from 1914. Every wall you open, there's something different behind, and there are always surprises. So we were juggling a lot of things, but in terms of restoration of the galleries, that included replacing silk wall fabrics, draperies, all of the lighting, which included what we talked about today and a lot more, carpets, door hardware, doors, walls, so much. There was a lot of juggling.
Huge.
It was a big project.
What an
yes,
amazing
but
undertaking.
an honor to work on it.
Well, I want to take, again, this opportunity to thank you both so much. I know you both worked so incredibly hard in assembling this, and we so appreciate everything you put together, and of course your work to restore the lighting at the Frick, and for you and your colleagues to have done such a magnificent job at the Frick, because it's such, I'm sure many people here have been to the Frick since it reopened, and it is, of course, fantastic.
And if you haven't, please come.
Yes, indeed. And again, I just want to take a quick opportunity to acknowledge Thomas Donahue and the beautiful cast that he found that are so complementary to the Frick. And again, thank you both. But just before we conclude, and by the way, we have cupcakes for the in-person audience. Vegan cupcakes, I hasten to add, for the in-person audience. Victoria Dengel is going to say a few words.
So, Jenna and Barbara, first of all, I love the synchronicity of of the presentation. It was so perfectly orchestrated, and that's preparation. I mean, the fact that you made it look, come across that way, it's so well done. You did this beautiful project, justice, both of you, in detailing it. And Barbara, I'm going to say that, we know Barbara and Aurora Lampworks for quite some time, because Dawn did a lecture here starting in 2013. Mm-hmm. And for the record, Dawn's career started with she was at a flea market somewhere in Europe, right? And she saw an inspirational mauve lampshade, which got the whole thing going, and which is just pretty wild. All those years ago, and enter Barbara, and I'm so impressed with your knowledge, the depth of your knowledge, and your ability to explain it. And I think everyone in this room will never look at lighting in the same way. We're going to be examining things up close, right? It's just, thank you for giving us, there's just this wonderful perspective to both of you. Thank you. And yes. And even the way that bust is lit, it just goes to show that she's a different woman. and when you exit the building, to the right, it's the last window. They lovingly installed, right, Thomas and you, that window on Friday, spending a lot of time just to get things right. So thank you. And Thomas making a run for that damask fabric. He disappeared on Friday. I'm going to 28 or whatever, 38th Street. I need fabric for the window, and he came with that. It just was perfect. Yeah. So thank you to everyone, and I turn the microphone over to my dear colleague. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, in conclusion, I think we have proved that lighting is everything. Absolutely. Yeah. We would like to make a little presentation. This won't be a surprise to Barbara, but a poster.
But I tried to look surprised.
Yes. An Oscar-winning act.
Thank you.
I am going to release you to have some wine and cupcakes, but I do want to take this opportunity as our last Archtober talk. It's often the people behind the scenes who don't get acknowledged. So first of all, I want to acknowledge our wonderful technical director, Angelo Vigorito.
Thank you, Angelo.
Meg Stanton, who handles everything online and does a magnificent job of that. Our volunteers, Arlene, Mary, Nancy, and of course, our wonderful maintenance staff member, Jimmy. So thank you. Thank you to our online audience. Thank you to our in-person audience. We look forward to seeing you in the not too distant future. Again, thank you so much for attending, and to our really wonderful speakers. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.